Or is he just using his time as Prime Minister as a stepping stone to a really lucrative career to replenish his already bulging bank account in the years to come? I wonder whether or not Rishi is just in this for himself. If he really cares about communities changing forever, about public services being crippled, about red wall MPs keeping their jobs. It's time for Rishi Sunak to wake up and smell the coffee. His own MPs and the majority of the British public have just had enough of this mass, uncontrolled immigration. They are begging him to act now, to save his job, red wall MPs' jobs and, frankly, this nation. Red Wall MPs say that they are being hammered on the doorsteps over immigration, and they're so desperate that they've even put together a 12-point plan to get to grips with our border crisis. If Rishi has got any sense, then he'll go for it. And if he doesn't understand the urgency of this situation, then someone needs to go and get him a hearing aid so he can hear the clamour from his own MPs, the public, and the loud creaking noises this country is making under the weight of this immigration scandal. Let's run through some of the plans put forward by the so-called new Conservatives, OK? Stop the student backdoor into Britain. Stop graduating overseas students from staying on in the UK for up to 2 years to find work, and extending the closure of the student-dependent route that allows a student's family members to access the jobs market. Good. The MPs advocate only allowing in skilled workers who earn £38,000 a year or more. Brilliant. We don't need people who come here and then have to live off the state. A cap of 20,000 on the number of refugees accepted for resettlement in the UK. Caps on future humanitarian schemes such as the Ukraine, Afghanistan and Hong Kong schemes. Great. A fixed cap means that once we've hit that, we can't continually be asked to throw our arms around the world and take everybody in. But these are the best ones for me. Making the Migration Advisory Committee report on the effect of migration on housing and public services, not just on the jobs market. It's time for all of these lefty-lovies out there to be confronted by the reality of their big open borders dream and the impact that this has on public services. The British public needs this information. Instead of just having one-sided figures about the labour market, we deserve to be able to judge that alongside the pressure immigration puts on hospitals, schools, housing. Talking of housing, they went on to put a 5% cap on the amount of social housing that councils can give to non-UK nationals. Frankly, I think it's a disgrace that British nationals are bumped down the social housing waiting list, so somebody who's just come here and can't look after themselves gets taxpayer-funded accommodation. There are other elements to this as well, but they're the big ones for me. I'll talk about the others later on. Make no mistake, if Rishi Sunak doesn't act on these recommendations now from the new Conservatives, then they will all be the former Conservatives, and he will be the former Prime Minister. Now is the time for him to act on this proposal and prove that he isn't just in it for himself. To be able to add Prime Minister to his CV. Well, it will mean nothing anyway, Rishi, because nobody voted for you, not even the Tory members. He's got the job by default, and if he cares about us, he will take action. We will find out whether or not he does very shortly. Well, those are my views. I want to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.com. I am joined now, getting stuck straight into the fray, by Jonathan Gullis, who is a member of this new Conservatives group. Jonathan, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show as ever. Look, I think Rishi's got a binary choice. He either proves that he cares about reducing immigration, and he listens to your proposals and he enacts them, or he doesn't, and he loses his job.
Well, look, I've always said to you, Patrick, and we've always agreed on it, that if we don't get control of migration, that's not just illegal migration, which the Prime Minister is rightly focusing on. That also means legal migration, where we saw, recently reported 600,000 net migration, which is totally unacceptable and goes against the manifesto commitment made in 2019 to not let it get above, at the very highest, the 216, I think it was, thousand rate as it was in 2019. But of course, we want to get that down much, much lower. So I agree with you that what we've proposed today is something for the Prime Minister to look at, some things that can be implemented quickly, some things that can go into the Conservative Party manifesto. So there's a very clear dividing line between us and the Labour Party, who quite frankly have vacated the field of ideas because Sir Keir Starmer's too busy flip-flopping on U-turning at every opportunity rather than actually coming up with a set of proposals. He can talk tough, but he doesn't walk tough.
OK, look, give us some of these proposals then. I know I've just rattled through a couple there, but do it again for us. What are the big ones for you?
Well, look, one of the ones that we want to look at, for example, is in the social care sector, where we had this temporary visa scheme introduced throughout the pandemic to help with the shortage of workers in that space. And that is, we accept fully that this scheme would have to be gradual in terms of scrapping such an idea. And of course, we accept that we are going to need foreign migrants to come to this country in order to fill some of the vacancies. But when you have 30,000 BTEC students studying health and social care, when you have 5 million economically inactive people, of which 12% would be able to fill the gap that there currently is in the health and social care market, we think it's up to supply side reforms, as we saw with HGV drivers, when we made accessing to testing quicker, as well as accessing to training easier, alongside the employers themselves increasing the wages, improving the terms and conditions, that made the job much more attractive. And we were able to fill those vacancies from within our great country. We want to see that copy and pasted into the UK, as well as you said, I think for me, the big one about student dependence. It's great that people want to come here and study here. We're not against international students, but we do not need to have everyone's family members also come over. And as you say, take potentially, 7 million GP places have been needed since 2010 to 2020 for migrants. 616,000 homes a year would need to be built to keep up with the current rate of migration, as discussed in a Centre for Policy Studies paper recently.
Well, exactly. And there are parallels with this idea of being able to look at the cost of our infrastructure versus the benefit of migration at the scale that we've got at the minute. There are parallels that with me with what went on during lockdown, where it was all just done through the prism of how many lives can we save and are we stopping the spread, as opposed to anyone actually going, well, hang on a minute, what's going on with the economy here? How long is this going to take us to pay it back? And I think this is vital, actually, isn't it? So what you guys want is for there to be reports published which go, look, here is the straightforward impact on infrastructure, houses, doctors' appointments, schools, etc. Here's the actual impact of migration at this level. We already know what the impact is on the jobs market and the economy because those figures get published. And so it is about time, I think, that the British public were able to very easily look at those things in the round and then make a decision, no?
Absolutely. As I said to you earlier, Patrick, 7 million GP surgery places needed to be made available in the last decade in order to deal with migration. We would need to build 616,000 homes, double what the 300,000 a year target was, in order to cope with current migration levels. And that, like you say, doesn't even include wages. And the Bank of England themselves have formally reported that a 10% increase in migration would actually see wages drop by around 2% in semi-skilled and unskilled services sector, which is obviously a bad thing. And Lord Stuart Rose himself said ahead of the Brexit referendum that if we obviously voted to leave and ended free movement, that would actually see wages go up, which I thought was a bizarre thing for the Remain campaign to push. But at least they were honest enough to be, and frank enough to tell the truth, that ultimately mass migration has led to wages being undercut for far too long, terms and conditions not being improved, and therefore not being jobs that seem excitable to members of the British public, as well as at the same time making sure members of the British public understand that if you are economically inactive, you do not have a right to sit at the taxpayer's expense. You must make sure you get into work and be held accountable. Because at the end of the day, it's not right that everyone else who's watching your show is having to pay their hard-earned pound in order to keep someone else in a nice home, have their heating paid for, cover their bills, etc.
No, 100%. And I do think as well, another really good idea on this is the cap on the amount of refugees that we can have. Because what we are seeing now is that we just have to throw our arms around the world. And that has become the expectation. Look, there was, of course, a justification when it came to Ukraine, when it came to certain people from Afghanistan, Hong Kong, for example. People understand that, I think. But then we looked at what happened in Sudan and people started going, well, hang on a minute, do we have a duty to accept everybody from there as well? You could throw a dart at the map of Africa and most of the Middle East, frankly, and find a place where plenty of people like the Archbishop of Canterbury would say we should be accepting everybody. But if we put a fixed cap on it, and that cap is a reasonable amount of people, and it is in line with what other countries are doing, then that means that we have the perfect excuse, frankly, to say, right, enough is enough now. This is our number. We've hit that number. That's manageable. That's it.
Well, imagine the Archbishop of Canterbury uses tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, in the Church of England to invest in some of these countries, to build the schools, the hospitals and the infrastructure they needed, rather than, like you say, virtue signalling in the House of Commons. And the other issue we have is organisations and individuals such as like Zoe Gardner, I think her name was, who spoke to the Nationality and Borders Public Bill Committee, basically saying that, and actually said in a recent interview with me on another channel, that we're the fifth richest economy in the world, so we should step up and do our bit. The idea that she seems to think that we've got an unlimitless pot of money and that people can just come on in and we'll somehow foot the bill when we're already paying £6 million a day just for the accommodation, let alone all the other costs. So she seemed perfectly happy this to rise to £32 million a day. She seemed perfectly happy for people to be able to choose where they wanted to go because they maybe had family members over here, or they maybe spoke the language, or they maybe had some sort of affinity because of colonialism back in the past. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd that people should be allowed to asylum shop in this country. And sadly, when you've got lefty woke organisations like that pushing that nonsense and narrative, it only acts as a beacon for smugglers to say to those people who are willing to needlessly put thousands of pounds in the hands of smuggling gangs that the UK is somehow some soft touch free ride, especially when we accept 70% at the moment, which is completely unacceptable, and France are only accepting 18%. So whilst I like to bash the French at every opportunity, because I think, you know, what we've seen recently shows how poor Macron is at handling things, at least at the very least, they've got common sense when it comes to approving or rejecting fake asylum claims.
Well, it's not rocket science, is it, as to why everybody wants to come over here? It's because they know that they're getting a worse deal anywhere else in Europe, and we are such a soft touch, and we'll probably allow them to stay. I mean, that should tell everyone everything they need to know about how kind and welcoming we actually really are. But there has to be a limit on that. And talking of limits and urgency, it is relatively unprecedented for quite a large number of MPs, Red Wall MPs especially, to basically try to draw up their own policy to really hold it right in front of Rishi Sunak's nose. Reading between the lines, Jonathan, you know, I don't want to insult you, but is it a bit of a, I'd like to keep my job, this is how I think we can do it, and maybe you, Rishi, don't quite understand how important this is? And how urgent is it that Rishi Sunak adopts this?
Look, the New Conservatives is a group of 2017-2019 Conservative MPs who represent the Blue Wall from the likes of Danny Kruger in Devizes to the Red Wall with Miriam Cates, Penistone and Stocksbridge. Both are co-leaders and co-founders of this organisation. And what we're simply trying to do is come up with the policy ideas for the future, something that can be enacted now and some things that can be put in the Conservative Party manifesto. And ultimately, the Conservative Party is a broad church, and politics is about having ideas and debating and discussing those ideas. And like I say, there seems to be, the field has been vacated by the Labour Party, and we believe that we should have good, honest debate. I fell in love with politics from watching the YouTube videos of 60s, 70s, 80s House of Commons debates, because you saw these big, long speeches, these big ideas being debated back and forth. And ultimately, that's good for democracy, that's good for public discourse, that's good for engagement in our democratic society. So I think all we're trying to do is put those ideas out there. I do think the Prime Minister understands the urgency. I can vouch personally on illegal migration, the amount of meetings he's had with me and other colleagues and keeping us up to date, as well as being brave enough with the illegal migration bill. So I do think he deserves full credit. But like I say, we're just trying to give him other ideas and let him know that he's got MPs who will have his back.
Yeah, and that is vital. And that is vital because with anything, there'll be pushback to this. So, look, thank you very much, Jonathan. Always an absolute pleasure. Take care. Jonathan Gullis there's a member of this New Conservatives group. We're going to be talking about different aspects of this new proposal throughout the course of this show. But get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. More on this story, of course, on our website, and go to gbnews.com now, which is the fastest-growing national news website in the country, don't you know? It's got the best analysis, big opinion, and all of the latest breaking news. But I tell you what, this is going to get you going. Police officers at Pride on Saturday were told not to wear a badge that commemorates colleagues killed in the line of duty. I think this is absolutely disgraceful. Is it yet another symptom of our woke police force? If not the force, then maybe the leadership behind them. And I've also got a little video for you that is going to make your blood boil of a police officer, well, how do I put this? Not doing his job. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
To GB News.
Well, in just a few minutes' time, I will have news of a major new GB News campaign as we urge the government, don't kill cash. And later in the hour, it's what you've all been waiting for, some of you anyway, the full story of the night when I got my clothes off in front of 1,000 people, including a couple of the bosses here at GB News. And, of course, it was all for charity. Thank you very much to everybody who has managed to raise so far nearly £90,000 for mine. JustGiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. But onto a very serious story indeed. The hits for the Met Police just keep on coming. Suella Braverman wants to know why they told officers not to wear badges that commemorate colleagues killed in the line of duty at Saturday's Pride event. The badge is a black and white Union flag with a thin blue line across the middle of it. Now, it's been alleged that it's been linked with far-right anti-trans groups, but in the United States anyway, so not even over here. I'm joined now by Bryn Hughes, whose daughter Nicola was sadly murdered whilst on duty in Greater Manchester in 2012. Thank you very much for joining us, Bryn. I'm just going to throw it over to you, really. How do you feel about the Met Police apparently being banned from wearing an emblem that commemorates fallen colleagues?
I mean, yeah, I've heard the stories over the weekend about the news that's been breaking about not wearing the badge. I mean, for me, what the thin blue line badge represents is the memory and the legacy of people like Nicola and Fiona and all the other officers we've lost before and since, and remembering that memory, and that's what it should be. That's what it symbolises, and that's what it should be worn as.
OK, and why do you think that they banned it? I mean, they were saying that it's caused offence, it's got links to, allegedly, the far right in America, for goodness sake. But, I mean, we're over here, it's police officers. Why are we banning things? Because someone might take something out of context and get offended by it?
I mean, like I said, I couldn't comment on whether people view it as far. That's the issue, if they view it as far right or not. And having said that as well, from America, from the context I've had in America, I've never known it to be viewed as far right over there. But I mean, if we lined up 100 police officers in the UK now and we asked each and every one of them why are they wearing it, they would all say, without a shadow of a doubt, in memory and support of the fallen colleagues and the fallen colleagues' families.
No, exactly. And if it's all right with you, Bryn, I think it might be worth remembering the context in which we're having this discussion and talking a little bit about Nicola and what happened, and therefore, as well, frankly, why this badge is so important, because it shows, unfortunately, the kind of risks that our brave police force put themselves in on a daily basis. So, yeah, would you mind just letting our viewers know? Is that all right?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, 2012, 11 years ago, I lost my daughter, Nicola. She was 23 years old. She was a police officer in Greater Manchester. And her and her colleague, Fiona Bourne, attended a bogus 999 call and was shot 32 times. And after they were shot 32 times, they had a grenade thrown at them. And that again represents that thin blue line of police officers. That every time we lose someone like Nicola and Fiona and everyone else since, that blue line gets a lot thinner. And at times, that's all that stands between the general public and people that would do us harm. And that's what it represents for me.
I think that's incredibly powerful, Bryn, really. And that is what it represents. There's no, really for you about it. That is what it represents. And I think if we are allowing our police force to do things which some people think are all right, the odd little TikTok dance routine or going to a pride event and wearing a rainbow badge and all of this stuff. Right, look, each to their own, don't get me wrong. But, they should be able to put a badge on that represents their fallen colleagues, like your daughter, and for us to actually really represent, this is what... I mean, the police force get a lot of stick, all right? And sometimes I dish it out if I think, if people have acted inappropriately or something like that. But people underestimate, I think, what can be called of them at times, and the kind of thing that they have to attend, and the good that they do for us, and what the risks that they take to keep us safe, Brit.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I meet up, and I say unfortunately, but I mean in the circumstances, I meet a lot of police officers now in various events, and the things that they deal with, the things that they witness, the things that they attend day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most of us wouldn't cope with that stress, that anguish, and those challenges that they face every day. And for me, when I meet up with these police officers and I see them wearing that thin blue line badge, that speaks volumes to me, to how they remember their fallen colleagues. And I mean, we've got a campaign going on at the moment for medals for heroes for emergency service workers and police officers, which would be honoured posthumously. And this sort of thing that's what we're trying to honour their memories. And when you look at, without going into too much detail, when we say goodbye to Nicola, and she was wearing her uniform for that final journey, she was wearing her badge. And that, for me, speaks volumes about what police officers face every single day, day in, day out.
Bryn, do you worry that not your ordinary police officers, but maybe those a bit higher up the chain, a bit woke, maybe? I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I suppose there's lots of people that they've got to. I don't know. They've got to satisfy a lot of people, I suppose. And when one decision can be judged, different by those people higher. And I think sometimes what you need to remember is that thin blue line of those 140,000 police officers in the UK. They need support as well. They need support that day in, day out, and they need to be reassured that those higher than them are supporting them on a daily basis.
Yeah, 100%. Look, Bryn, thank you very, very much for coming on and talking about your story and talking about Nicola's story as well, and speaking so passionately about that issue. Take care. It's Bryn Hughes there. His daughter Nicola was sadly murdered while on duty at Greater Manchester in 2012. Right, look, loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. There is the very frightening story of the banks who are shutting accounts for people because they don't agree with their political views. Make no mistake, there is a line in the sand being drawn here now. We are trying to draw it. We've got a new campaign called Don't Kill Cash here at GBNews. We want to make sure that the vulnerable people in society cannot be held to the mercy of banks and totalitarian regimes or tyranny, etc. You deserve to be able to have a bit of cash in your pocket, frankly. And this is a little bit more fun. Stand by for the full story of my triumphant appearance with the male strippers, the Dreamboys. All for charity, of course, all for charity. But first, it's the headlines with Tamsin.
Patrick, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 3:32. Nearly 4,000 people crossed the Channel in June, the highest monthly figure in the past 5 years. The figures come almost 6 months after Rishi Sunak vowed to stop the boats. But that's still a 10% decrease in crossings compared to June last year. Drivers paid nearly £1 billion more for fuel at supermarkets last year after they increased their profit margins. An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority has found that drivers paid an extra 6 pence per litre for fuel. The Chancellor supports the CMA's call for a fuel finder scheme, enabling drivers access to live station-by-station fuel prices on their phones or sat-navs. A Cabinet Office investigation says Sue Gray broke the Civil Service Code as a result of undeclared contact between herself and the Labour Party. The former senior civil servant led the investigation into lockdown-breaking gatherings in Downing Street. Ms Gray was cleared last week by the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments to start work as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff in September. The anti-corruption watchdog ruled it had seen no evidence that her decision-making was impaired while serving in Whitehall. Downing Street insists discussions on NHS pay and conditions can't be held unless strikes are called off. The British Medical Association says doctors could continue to strike over the next few years if their demands are not met. Junior doctors are planning 5-day strike action from the 13th to the 18th of July, and consultants are also walking out on the 20th and 21st of July. Almost 650,000 appointments and operations have been postponed in England since widespread disruption started late last year. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2702 and €1.1633. The price of gold is £1,516.69 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,517 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, today we are launching a new campaign here on GB News. Don't kill cash. Britain is fast becoming a cashless society. More and more retailers are choosing to only accept card payments, and vulnerable people who rely on cash are increasingly being left behind. A massive 5.4 million adults still rely on cash, and it's used in 6 billion transactions every single year. But strong vested interests are pushing for it to be permanently replaced by debit and credit cards and other electronic payments. We are calling on the government to introduce legislation committing to protect the status of cash as legal tender and as a widely accepted means of payment in the UK until at least 2050. And this affects absolutely everybody. You can see on your screens now a petition. It's a QR code at the moment. So if you've got a smartphone, use it to click on that QR code that you're seeing on your screen right now, and it will take you to the petition, which you can sign. Also, alternatively, you can just go on our website, gbnews.com. You will find it on there as well. Help GB News with our campaign and tell the authorities, the people in power, don't kill cash. OK, this affects absolutely everybody. We've already seen what's happened with Nigel Farage, for example, and that will happen and can happen to you. You might just be one wrong word away from having your bank account closed. And then what happens? Well, you wait ages and by the time that they've apologised to you, well, then, frankly, it's too late. You've already lost your house or whatever else has happened as well. Think about the elderly people out there who don't want to have to go out and use their card or online banking. Online banking exclusively is an absolute playground for fraudsters? What about the homeless as well? If nobody's carrying cash, what are they going to do? Just freeze and starve to death on the streets? Our campaign ties in massively, though, with this story, because banks are closing people's accounts because they don't agree with their views. This is an absolute shocker. This story was broken by our very own Nigel Farage last Thursday, and since then, it has absolutely exploded. Numerous people have said that they've effectively been cancelled by their bank, including a vicar who says that he was a victim after complaining about the bank's comments on Pride. So here you go. Yet again, if you don't agree with the woke agenda, then they will try to take your money off you. It's now been reported that Jeremy Hunt is deeply concerned about this. I'm sure he is. He's ordered an investigation. I'm joined now by Michael Simmons, who's a data journalist with The Spectator. Michael, thank you very, very much. This has proven to be a much wider problem than initially people thought. And it is starting to look like you are just one wrong think or one wrong word away from some faceless big banker saying, no, we're not going to let you have an account with us. And that non-persons you.
Yeah, it's very worrying because as your campaign points out, you know, increasingly in this society we live in, you just cannot get by on cash only. You need to be able to make card payments. And if banks can cut people off, they can, as you say, non-person you can make it impossible for you to function in this society. And what's kind of worrying is, I think since Nigel Farage broke the story last week, you've heard more and more that this, you know, it isn't just happening to big political figures. We've heard of church groups it's happened to. There's a blogger up in Scotland who's very anti-SNP, is also quite vocal on the trans issue, and he says that he's lost access to his bank accounts. So for some of these people, it does seem like it is purely been done for political reasons or because of the bank's reputation. And that's something that, if we are going to move to a society that you don't want us to, but it is looking increasingly likely that it's just and just online currency, then the banks, you know, cannot cut you off because you cannot function without your digital banking.
Well, this is it. And for everybody who's been laughing at the likes of Nigel Farage and his situation, they should be very wary. They should be very worried about what they wish for, because actually it could happen to them, and they're only a different form of government or a different form of social norms and values or a different issue that they disagree with vehemently away from it happening to them. We have seen some examples, for example, in other countries during lockdown and things with PayPal and Canada and places like that, where if you did disagree with the government line on it, they essentially would freeze your assets. And I think this is the other push that we're trying to make here, which is we want to fight back against the potential for tyranny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Canada is the most obvious example where they had the trucker protests in the last couple of years, and eventually Trudeau decided what turned out to be quite effective in an authoritarian way was basically to cut off their funding for their banks through PayPal, and it meant that they had to give up. And I think, you know, people agree that maybe for certain, if there's like actually a crime, like if we're talking about people channeling money for terrorism, then the banks need to be able to do something about that. But fundamentally, being able to bank should be a right. So we need to make sure that, one, if the banks are going to cut people off, they have to be very strong reasons for doing it. But also there needs to be transparency so that if this happens to you, you can challenge it. I mean, for example, if your banks are genuinely cutting people off for a political reason, I would have thought that was, you know, straight up in breach of the Equality Act, which clearly states that genuinely held philosophical beliefs are protected in law. So if that was the reason, then you could, you know, legally challenge that. But right now, people are finding it hard to challenge because it seems that the banks are just not telling people, you know, the reason they've taken this decision. And we need to change that so that people can challenge it, and the banks can say, you know, this one, there was a valid reason for some law, or it falls apart and you can say this was illegal, shouldn't have been done.
Yeah, and as well, there are quite straightforward elements to this, which is that if you have a completely cashless society and all of your money is essentially with somebody else, then you have ultimately no power over that, really. And if things did go south, whether it was through fraud or tyranny, then you would be out on your backside. So that is a massive problem. I feel very passionately, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, about the impacts on the elderly and in rural communities as well that this could well have, the homeless. So we're going to be talking about all of that. But I do really think, Michael, that there is the potential at the moment for there's something very, very sinister to be revealed. There's going to be subject access requests conducted by Nigel Farage. It'll be fascinating to see what the upshot of all of that is. But I think, Michael, that the left should be getting behind this, because they talk about people, don't they, being financially excluded from society. People who are maybe below the breadline, they can't have a bank account. And they like to talk about those when it suits them, but they're not really talking about them now, are they?
Yeah, well, like sort of wider free speech and I guess cancel culture issues, this is something that, it can affect everyone, as you've pointed out. And people, of the left or people who disagree with, to take an example, Nigel Farage might say, oh, haha, this has happened to Nigel Farage, I don't like him. But this could easily happen to anyone, depending on not just the government of the day, but depending on who are the people in these banks that are making these decisions. So if we just stand by and say, it's fine for this to happen to one person, then it could happen to anyone. And that's why we need to be clear to the banks that if they're going to do this, they have to set out a clear reason for it that can be challenged. And then ultimately, if we need to cut people's banks off for some legal reason, that should be a decision made by courts, not corporations.
Absolutely. It would be very easy to declare some kind of state of emergency and, oh, whoopsie, sorry, we've just got to take a load of money out of your bank account to pay for this, and we can't have that. Michael, thank you very much. Michael Simmons there, who's a data journalist with The Spectator. Yes, I also feel incredibly passionately, I will be talking about this a bit later, about the impact that this will have on the elderly community. We've already heard stories of people who want to go out. Their lifeline might be their car if they're still able to drive at a certain age, so they can go and park in the town centre. Well, look at all the parking bays. Now, they're all going to the cashless version, aren't they? So someone has to mess around with an app, and then they just decide, well, it's not worth the hassle, so they stay indoors, and they become a prisoner in their own homes just because they can't go and put a coin in a meter. Absolutely staggering. Right, OK. Moving on from that now, though, because it is almost time for the moment that some of you, anyway, have been waiting for. Yes, you're about to find out exactly what happened when I got my kit off for charity last week. It's all for a good cause. Make sure if you've got any money at all, donate, please. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Yes, OK, all right. Well, there's still loads to come here, but at 4 o'clock we will hear from one of the Red Wall Tory MPs who are urging Rishi Sunak to cut net migration by 400,000 before the next election. These MPs have had enough. So have a lot of you, and they are just saying, look, it's now or never, Rishi. Do you think that Rishi Sunak actually really cares? I'm wondering whether or not he's starting to look like a man who's just in it for himself. Is he lining up his next job afterwards? But here we go. More than a year ago, I agreed to dance on stage with a group of male strippers called the Dreamboys. And last week, it finally happened. And I can tell you that, for me at least, it was incredible. But if you're listening on radio and you want to see me get my kit off, then we'll be posting the video on all of our social media channels in the next couple of minutes. I just want to remind everyone, this is, of course, the culmination of a big charity campaign for the mental health charity Mind, to try to save some lives together. There is a mental health crisis in this country, and so far you wonderful people have donated nearly £90,000. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. I promised I would uphold my end of the bargain. Here it goes. It's Dreamboy time. I am here at the Churchill Theatre in Bromley, where in a matter of moments I will be getting my kit off on stage with the Dreamboys in front of 1,000 people. Why? Because you wonderful people have raised tens of thousands of pounds for the mental health charity Mind. You have saved some lives. Now it's time for me to do my bit. To the stage. Let's go, mate.
Your dressing room key, sir?
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello, are you Patrick?
I am indeed.
Perfect. Please sign in here.
OK. Right then, which way is the dressing room?
You want to jump in the lift?
Here we go. We are backstage at the Dreamboys. Outside there are so many people. I don't know if you can hear them shouting already. I am absolutely bricking it. I'm on in the second half, so I've got to watch this lot do their thing, and that gives me about an hour to think about it all. You know what? I don't know what preconceived ideas anyone has about Dreamboys or anything. This lot are top professionals. Everything they do, they train so hard. This is a highly skilled job. The amount they have to remember, the condition they've got to keep themselves in, the nerves about performing in front of these people. But you know what the best thing is? They're such nice guys. This has been an honour and a privilege, so thank you. I've just got to go out there now and smash it and do it all for charity.
Right, so as I was explaining earlier, we have an actual special guest and a special performance tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christys from GBNews, news anchor, right, a couple years ago said, do you know what? For charity, I'm gonna shred loads of weight, get fit and Dreamboy sexy, and I'm gonna perform live on stage in front of a live audience. Ladies and gentlemen, to this day, he's raised, how much have you raised? £81,000. £81,000 for the charity Mind. Ladies and gentlemen, let's lose our minds for him and give him an amazing round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patrick Christys. Come on! Hey, thank you so much. Before you go, did you have fun?
It's been the best night of my life, yeah.
Like, bearing in mind what he does for a living, he ran off stage and was like, can I be a dream boy? Can I be a dream boy? Can he be a dream boy?
There you go.
There you go. Give him a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Right, well, that's the kind of thing that lives with you forever, isn't it? Thank you very much to everybody who has been donating. JustGiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. There is a very, very serious undertone to all of this. I wanted to try to come up with a novel way to try to raise awareness for the plight of mental health in this country, specifically male suicide as well. I'm absolutely staggered to know that the greatest killer of men under the age of 40 is not road traffic accidents, it's not cancer, it's not heart attacks, it's male suicide. And that, I think, is incredibly bleak, really. And a lot of people feel as though there isn't help out there for them. A lot of people might struggle in the short term to access NHS care, etc. And that is where groups like Mind come in to play. You can get in touch with Mind and they can sort out what's known as an urgent referral. If you are right on the brink, as unfortunately many people are, then actually, essentially trying to access and being given a 6-month waiting time on the NHS is not really good enough. And that is where groups like Mind come in to play. So justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys is, of course, that link there. You can donate as well. If you're listening on GB News Radio or watching on TV and you want to see it again, then you can catch it right now on YouTube, Twitter. I did it to raise money for that mental health charity Mind, and I am delighted to say that we have now raised more than £88,000. Thank you to everybody who has donated. You can go to justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Let's save some lives together. Now, next hour, More than 20 Tory MPs are urging Rishi Sunak to get tough on immigration and cut net migration by 400,000. Is that good enough for you? We'll be finding out very, very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we, of course, are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc. That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Do you think that Rishi Sunak actually cares about reducing net migration? 25 Red Wall MPs have come out with a 12-point plan. I think if he doesn't enact it, frankly, maybe, just maybe, is he using the office of Prime Minister as a stepping stone to a much more lucrative career? Possibly. In other news, we're also going to be talking about this. No pride in police. That's right, police attending pride events, which is a question mark in itself, isn't it, were banned from wearing a badge that commemorates their fallen colleagues. Oh, but it's okay. You can slap a rainbow badge on. What on earth are our priorities in the woke police chief's minds? In other news, I'm also going to be talking a lot about this. Don't ban petrol cars. Yes, that's right. This hurtling towards the net zero agenda, which, by the way, another topic, could see 120 miles worth of pylons slapped across the British countryside. Is it time to row back on this ban from petrol cars? I certainly think so. And this is something a bit different. Yes, that's right. A new type of funeral is available, people. I don't know whether or not you want to get cremated, you want to get buried. However, seriously now, do you want to get boiled in a bag? I certainly don't. Patrick Christys on GB News. Ugh, I don't like that at all. Anyway, GBviews at GBnews.com. Pretty straightforward. Do you think Rishi's heart is really in it? Do you think he really cares about this country's top priorities? GBviews at GBnews.com. Headlines now with Polly.
Petri, thank you. Good afternoon. The top story on GB News today. Nearly 4,000 migrants crossed the English Channel in the month of June. That's the highest monthly figure for the past 5 years. And it pushes the total for the year so far to more than 11,000. But that's still a 10% decrease in crossings compared to the same time last year. And the figure comes almost 6 months after Rishi Sunak vowed to stop the boats as one of his cabinet's chief objectives. Drivers paid nearly £1 billion more for their fuel at supermarkets last year after they increased their profit margins. An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority has found that drivers paid an extra 6 pence per litre for fuel at supermarket petrol stations. The Chancellor supports the CMA's call for a cheapest fuel finder website which could help motorists find the best and nearest fuel prices on phones or in-car sat-navs. Politics and a Cabinet Office investigation says Sue Gray broke the Civil Service Code as a result of undeclared contact between herself and the Labour Party. The former senior civil servant led the investigation into lockdown-breaking gatherings at Downing Street. But Miss Gray was given permission last week by the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments to start work as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff in September. The anti-corruption watchdog ruled it had seen no evidence that her decision-making was impaired while serving in Whitehall. Downing Street insists discussions on NHS pay and conditions can't be held until strikes are called off. The British Medical Association says doctors could continue to strike over the next few years if their demands aren't met. Junior doctors are planning 5 days of strike action from the 13th to the 18th of July, and consultants are walking out on the 20th and 21st of the same month. Rail passengers are being warned of disruption as train drivers refuse to work overtime all this week. Services with 16 train operators will be running a limited service from today until Saturday as representatives continue their dispute over pay. ASLEF says its members at 15 train operators will take part in additional industrial action from the 17th to the 22nd of July. And children in England face disruption in the classroom this week as teachers are due to strike for 2 days over their pay. Labour claims state schools in England have paid over £8 billion to recruitment agencies since 2010. The party says it plans to introduce a new payment to encourage teacher recruitment and keep existing teachers after they've completed their 2-year early career framework. Shadow Schools Minister Stephen Morgan says the government is failing trade unions.
We know that obviously there will be strike action this week. I think that's a failure of this government not to get round the negotiation table with our trade unions. I think Gillian Keegan should apologise to parents that will face disruption this week. I'm not going to make a commitment on TV today around what we would pay teachers, but the least the Secretary of State could do is to sit round the room with trade unions and negotiate a deal so that we can end the strikes once and for all.
Well, let's bring you up to date now with events in France, where town halls and municipal buildings have been attacked and damaged during the last 6 days of riots across the country. A gathering has been held by the mayor and residents of Persin in northern France, where the town hall was set on fire by rioters. More than 100 people were arrested after a 6th night of violence across the country. That follows the death of teenager Naël Marzouk, who was shot by police in Paris last week. France correspondent for The Times, David Chazan, says things are starting to calm down now.
Not only did the arrests drop dramatically, but there was a significant fall in violence and vandalism. There was still some trouble on the streets in cities like Marseille, a little bit in Lyon, and a few scuffles and clashes in the suburbs of Paris, but far less than before. And that's the second night running that we've seen such a decrease in the intensity of the violence. So the hope is now that these protests are beginning to die down.
And lastly, the government has rejected suggestions the Orkney Islands could cut ties with the UK. The Scottish Islands say due to challenges over funding, it's looking to break ties with Westminster and Holyrood and is considering reviving historic ties with Norway. Orkney Council says it should explore options which provide greater fiscal security and economic opportunities. Number 10 says the government's position is that the UK is stronger united. That's your news. More on all those stories at gbnews.com.
A very, very dangerous thing is happening in Britain. We are being turned into a cashless society. Ask yourselves this. Who does a cashless society benefit? Big business? Big corporation? Big banks? Fraudsters? Totalitarian regimes? It gives total control to all the wrong people and leaves you totally at their mercy. That is why GB News is launching its Don't Kill Cash campaign. We want to stand up against tyranny and stand up for vulnerable people. We are witnessing right now that banks will close the accounts of people who go against the establishment agenda. Just look at what's happening to Nigel Farage and a whole host of other anti-establishment figures who are coming out of the woodwork now. We've seen governments freeze people's assets if they went against the lockdown nonsense. We've seen companies like PayPal do the same. How long will it be before people get their assets frozen because they don't go along with the LGBTQ+ agenda or if they say the wrong thing about mass immigration? We are hurtling towards a Chinese-style social credit system whereby good citizens are allowed to receive money and bad ones have it taken off them. It quite literally buys compliance, it buys silence, it buys obedience, it buys control. I don't want to live in a society where you're one wrong word away from being bankrupt. I don't dare say that you do either. This is a way of financially excluding people, and this is important, turning people into non-people. The left get very energised about people being financially excluded from society. Well, they should be piping up about this. But this campaign isn't just about stopping the asphyxiating hand of totalitarian tyranny, no. It's also about standing up for the rights of the marginalised. Cash is a lifeline for the elderly. Many older people struggle with online banking. For a lot of elderly people who can still drive, they rely on being able to park their car up in a town centre and going for a little walk to keep themselves stimulated and to meet people. But now parking meters are going fully cashless. This means grandmas and granddads around the country will have to try to use phone apps to pay online, and that is completely unfair. It will trap them in their own homes and make them feel less a part of society than many of them, sadly, already do. We should be enabling the elderly, not shunning them. What about people in rural communities as well, with poor broadband or mobile connectivity? Cash can keep struggling rural communities going, the cogs of the local economy turning. And going digital will put a big spoke in the wheel. What about the homeless? They survive by people walking past and just giving them a bit of spare change, maybe even a note if they're lucky. If we're all walking around with digital wallets, then what happens to them? Do they just starve or freeze on the streets? But also, think about this. If all of your currency is online, then that is a complete gift for online fraudsters. You might wake up one morning and someone's completely cleaned you out and you haven't got any cash to fall back on. Well, what do? You're screwed. Cash is also sentimental. It has sentimental as well as monetary value. There is something very special about getting a £5 note in a birthday card, isn't there? Or the tooth fairy leaving a couple of quid under your pillow as a child. I mean, it's also a great way of keeping the Queen's memory alive. GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign is calling on the government to introduce legislation committing to protect the status of cash as legal tender and as a widely accepted means of payment in the UK until at least 2050. But in order to speak for you, we do need your help. Sign up and register with our petition using the QR code that's on your screen right now, or you can do it directly on our website, gbnews.com. Just hold your phone next to the QR code and follow the steps, or like I've said, just go to the website if you find that a little bit easier. If any of the different dangers of a cashless society that I've just mentioned there concern you, and I'm sure that many of you will be able to think of some other negatives as well, then let's fight back Our leaders need to know that the people have spoken and the people are shouting, "Don't kill cash." Well, that's what I think. I want to hear from you as well. gbviews@gbnews.com. We'll be returning to this a little bit later on throughout the course of the show as well, bearing in mind what's happening to Nigel Farage and many others like him. Can I just give a very quick shout-out as well, quickly, talking of cash and money and donations, actually. Look, in the last hour then, at the end, I did just play that clip of me dancing on stage with the Dreamboys, all to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. We'll be doing more on that in the next hour. But can I just say a massive thank you, because in the last 5 minutes, you have raised more than £3,000, including one for an individual who, in fact, has given £2,000 plus £500 gift aid. It's from a chap called David, who said, "When I wanted to end my life, I had friends around me who could help, and I was lucky to be able to go to a private hospital for treatment, but many of us men do not have that support or the resources." I want to thank you personally, David. I also want to thank literally everybody who's given from £2,500 down to £2.50. We are up to now, £91,087. We will be closing the campaign tomorrow, OK? And look, if we can get up above that, every little helps, as it were, but it is genuinely to try to save lives and stop this epidemic of male suicide, any form of suicide. Every single day, 12 men take their own lives, and that is something that really, really needs sorting out. So thank you very much, everybody who's donated. But we'll get back to the matter in hand, shall we? And our top news story at the moment is Rishi Sunak facing calls from more than 20 of his own MPs to cut net migration by 400,000 before the next election. In like that breaking news that we brought you as well, that nearly 4,000 people across the channel already this year, so that's the illegal side of it. But net migration last year was 606,000, and the MPs, who were from a group called the New Conservatives, say the proposed measures would help the government meet the 2019 manifesto pledge that there will be fewer lower-skilled migrants and overall numbers will come down. Well, good grief, it'd be a nice thing, wouldn't it? I'm joined now by Chris Green, who is a member of the New Conservatives group. I'm very pleased to be joined by him. Thank you very much, Chris. Great to have you on the show. Why are you feeling the need to draw up a new policy now for a Prime Minister who, frankly, by now should get it?
Well, the starting point is that 2019 manifesto, our commitment to reduce immigration from that already quite high position of 226,000 in the year before. We need to bring it down. So clearly, we have to respect democracy, but we have to recognise also the circumstances we've been under since 2019. A whole load of people have come over from Hong Kong. No one expected war in Europe to be one of the big issues of our time. And so there are particular circumstances at the moment, but it's very easy for business and for others to become, in a sense, addicted to cheap labour from overseas. So a group of Conservative MPs are gathering together to actually speak, I think, for so many of our constituents and for so many people around the country, to make it clear to the Prime Minister that whilst you have some voices saying maintain immigration at that level, it does need to come down substantially.
This for me. Cap of 20,000 on the number of refugees accepted for resettlement in the UK. Great stuff. We need that, because otherwise we'll continually be asked to throw our arms around the world, and that, frankly, cannot happen. Stop the back door into Britain from the old student visa scam, which, again, I can't believe it's taken this long to come to fruition, but there we go. A 5% cap on the amount of social housing that councils can give to non-UK nationals. Great. People are sick and tired of British people being bumped down a housing waiting list because someone's just got here and, frankly, they can't look after themselves. We're also going to be having a look, and this is vital, as a cost-benefit analysis of migration, which is not done regularly enough, which shows you the impact on the public services, as well, of course, of the impact to the economy and the labour market. Do you think that we have been living under a rigged system so far, where people are only told about what's needed for the labour market and they're not shown the reality of what happens to GP appointments, social housing, etc.?
The Migration Advisory Committee should include the other challenges we face in the considerations when they give that advice. And we know, constituency MPs, whether you're Labour, whether you're Conservative, anyone else, we know for a very long time that having an influx of people puts pressure on services, but that's very rarely recognised by the broader system. And these things, when we're dealing with it, we ought to be raising this with the Prime Minister and with the political establishment more broadly. And actually, I think this is the majority position in the country.
I agree.
That it's not just about jobs. It's about schools, it's about culture, it's about hospital services, it's about council services. All of these things have more pressure when you have people moving in, and you don't control it if you have these massive surges, as we've seen. I think this is the responsible thing to do, is to reduce it, get it under control, because this is what people expect.
Yeah, but does Rishi Sunak get this, OK? Does he really understand the urgency of this? The line that came out from this group of MPs, the New Conservatives, was quite stark. We are being hammered on the doorstep. We are being hammered on the doorstep. Just tell me a bit about that. How bad is it? And how urgently does Rishi Sunak need to act? Because, look, from where I'm sitting, he talks a good game, but I'm not seeing any action. To me, it doesn't look like he really cares.
Well, David Cameron had a target to bring net immigration down to the tens of thousands, so it's under 100,000. Since then, it's gone up and up and up. So I do believe Rishi Sunak gets it, because constituents right across the country are telling their MPs, members of Parliament, often privately, are raising this with the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and others. And now it's become a bit more public because, in part, the Prime Minister, who's relatively new in position, he's only been there for about 10 months or so, he is getting to grips with it. This is why one of his 5 missions or 5 statements of interest is on illegal immigration. He is aware of the concerns over legal immigration as well. So this is something where I think when other voices are saying keep it high, we need to be saying keep it low. And I do believe he gets it, but it does take time to deliver.
I worry that
and
he's too scared.
Whether it's the courts or whether it's the House of Lords and Labour politicians, that is huge institutional challenge.
Yeah, I get that, and I worry that he's too scared. I worry that he's too scared of looking at spreadsheets and seeing, oh, well, yeah, gosh, what's the impact here that's going on with the economy? Oh, we've got to accept this number of people because we're too afraid of going into a recession, etc. And then that won't lead to any kind of action. And what is sacrifice there is social housing, it's culture, it's a way of life. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm covering a show later on. For part of it, I went up and down the Edgware Road in London and spoke to people about integration and multiculturalism there. And let me tell you what, that was quite stark. But look, I want to say thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you very much for having a chat with me and for putting your head above the parapet as well. Fingers crossed that the New Conservatives are listened to. That's Screen there, of course, who's been at the coalface of all of this. He's a Conservative MP for Bolton West and a member of that New Conservatives group. Loads more on this story on our website, gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news site in the country. Best analysis, big opinion, all the latest breaking news. But I tell you what, talking of things that have been broken, what about the Civil Service Code? Yes, loads of you have been emailing in about this. Do you really think I would miss the opportunity to talk about this? Sue Gray did break the Civil Service Code as a result of the undeclared contact between her and the Labour Party. That is according to the findings of the Cabinet Office investigation. The former civil servant was cleared last week by the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments, ACOBA, to start work as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff from September. But a lot of people thought, hang on a minute, this is all a little bit fishy, certainly in light of what went on to Boris Johnson and then people who criticised that committee like Jacob Rees-Mogg. Our political reporter, Catherine Forster, joins us now from Westminster. So, good grief, Sue Gray, she's a rule breaker.
Well, she apparently is, and it was very shocking, wasn't it, at the beginning of March when we suddenly discovered that Sue Gray, who had led the inquiry into all those gatherings in Downing Street that ultimately precipitated the removal of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, was going to work for Keir Starmer as his Chief of Staff. It was really a huge moment. And now, of course, despite the fact that ACOBA cleared her last week to start in September after a 6-month delay, and they said there was no evidence that her impartiality was impaired in her time in Whitehall, the Cabinet Office inquiry that Sue Gray was asked to participate in but chose not to, has reached a rather different conclusion. They've said there was a prima facie breach of the code. That means at first sight or apparent, superficial, because she resigned at the beginning of March, but it turns out that she'd been in contact with Keir Starmer at the end of October while she had a very senior job in the civil service. in the Cabinet Office. Now, they say that she should have told the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case or Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove of those conversations, and that she didn't, and that is what the breach of the code is about. Of course, probably a lot of people will think that if you're going for a job, are you really going to tell the people that you're currently working with that you're going for a job? Probably not, but nevertheless, the Conservatives, of course, deeply unhappy about her behaviour because, you know, as the role that she had, essential to be impartial, and they are saying that the fact that she's going off to work with Keir Starmer proves to them that they think that Partygate report was politically motivated. Now, of course, Labour take a very different view. They're delighted to get her. She's been in Whitehall for decades. She's got vast knowledge of how government works. They basically don't care what the Cabinet Office say. They've just said this is a political stunt by a Tory government out of ideas. That was from one of Keir Starmer's team a bit earlier. They're looking forward to having her, and basically they don't care what anybody thinks.
No. Of course. Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster joining us from Westminster. Double standards much? Anybody? Double standards much? Former official Sue Gray broke civil service rules after failing to declare contact with Labour over a job offer. That is a Cabinet Office inquiry. Labour said that it's a political stunt. Well, presumably now that they've criticised the integrity of this inquiry, then, well, I mean, good grief, are they going to have to apologise now? Isn't it just remarkable that one thing like Boris Johnson can be given all of the press coverage in the world, and there can be very, very serious consequences to that. But someone here, I mean, unequivocally, according to this, can have broken the rules. Not just thought about something, not just accidentally misled a parliament, not just taken bad advice. No, unequivocally, according to this Cabinet Office inquiry, broke civil service rules. And she just keeps the job, carries on, everything's fine. Oh, it's a political stunt. Funny that, isn't it? gbviews@gbnews.com. But police officers at Pride on Saturday were told not to wear a badge that commemorates colleagues killed in the line of duty. In the last hour, we heard from the father of a policewoman who sadly was killed in the line of duty. He's understandably not happy about all of this. But I want to know what the flipping heck is going on with our police force at the top brass. Who is making these decisions that you can go to Pride with a rainbow flag on, but you cannot wear a badge that commemorates your fallen colleagues? Seriously? Absolutely shocking. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, in just a few moments' time, I will talk about fresh calls to the government not to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles in 2030. They've got to, surely. We're paying for everything through the nose at the moment, and we've just got to stop all that madness. But, well, we've all had boil-in-the-bag food, but how would you fancy a boil-in-the-bag funeral? Stay tuned to find out the details behind this very, very strange story. Apparently, this is the future of funerals. I'm not sure I want anything to do with it, but yes, there we go. Right, OK, so back to a much more serious story. The hits keep coming for the Met Police. In fact, they should be the lowlights, really, shouldn't they? So Ella Braverman wants to know why they told officers not to wear badges that commemorate their colleagues that have been killed in the line of duty at Saturday's Pride event. The badge is a black and white Union flag with a thin blue line across the middle of it. It's alleged that it's linked to far-right anti-trans groups in the United States, which leads me to beg the question, why on earth has that got anything to do with us, frankly? I'm joined now by Simon Harding. He's a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. Simon, thank you very much. What do you make of there being calls for them to not be allowed to wear this badge that commemorates colleagues, presumably maybe at times some of your colleagues as well, who have sadly died in the line of duty?
Yeah, I mean, the badge itself isn't banned from the uniform itself. I mean, it's still allowed in daily work and allowed to be worn by officers on a daily basis. But this is a decision which is based on something which I find a little bit strange, in that not the fact of obviously people's beliefs that it's linked to a far-right badge or anti-trans badge in America, but I mean, is that relevant enough? You know, has somebody complained to say this is why it should be taken off, or is this just a decision by the commander who's in charge of policing the Pride rally that took place? I find it a bit strange, and I find it a little bit that, like most officers, you know, you are ebbing away again at those officers and saying that, you know, you don't mean as much as everybody else, and I think that's the problem. That I can see. Officers are starting to, you know, leave, and they are leaving in their droves, and this is just another way of chipping away at them.
So you think that officers are leaving because of stuff like this?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the statistics given out by the government recently, I think it's something like 72% higher now, voluntary resignations, than it was the year before. I mean, that's not, you can't just brush by that figure and say that, you know, it could be for different reasons. And when somebody did analysis and spoke to like 100 officers around why they are leaving, these are the reasons why, is that the way that they're being treated within the organisation. And I think, you know, you can't do something like this to officers. I mean, I lost a dear friend in 2013, and many other colleagues will talk about colleagues they lost, you know, during the line of duty. And we saw, you know, Nicola and Fiona's dad speak at Greater Manchester, you know, and he nailed it, didn't he, when he said that thin blue line gets thinner. And I think that's why it gets thinner. When you start to see how many people are leaving, if you carry on like this, there is going to be a bigger problem than you can really imagine.
And this, I am convinced, is not your ordinary police officer whatsoever who's saying this stuff. I'm sure of it. It's got to be some faceless individual higher up who appears to be petrified of causing any offence, even when absolutely no offence is intended or given. It would have to be somebody, if we just play the tape forward on this, looking at that badge, which is singularly designed in this country really to represent, fallen colleagues, etc., looking at it, trying to see if someone in America meant it in a different reason, and then choosing to be offended about that because they've deliberately taken it out of context. Why are we succumbing to the lowest common denominator here and not just standing up for our police?
Yeah, I agree. And it's not, to get it in context, it's not the Union Jack that's being used in America. It's the American flag being used in America, and it has a different connotation. Something that is used in one country might mean something very different in another. And like you say, but it's the intention to use it. I imagine, and it shouldn't come across either as a anti-trans or anything. I would be surprised if you lined up everybody that was there for that rally and said to them, does this offend you? Half of them wouldn't know what it's for, and the other half would say, no, I completely understand that and respect that. So I don't really think that, this has come from, a big group who organised Pride saying, we want that badge removed. I think this is possibly an individual, and I don't think it's somebody at the very, very top. I think it's somebody else who potentially might use it in their promotion later on. Who knows? Yeah, well, this is it. Yeah, exactly that. It just ties in with a lot of things that we've been talking about, Simon, actually. You've got to think and act in a certain way these days if you want to get on, or in some cases have a bank account as well. Simon, thank you. Simon Harding there, the former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. My concern will be that this rubs off on the ordinary coppers, then, because as I'm going to play to you a little bit later on in this hour, actually, we've got a video of a police officer essentially refusing to do their job. That's not the kind of copper that Simon was. That's not the kind of copper that people love and respect, and I'm convinced that traditionally this country was full of. I'm sorry, but we are chipping away now at what it means to be a police officer. That appears to be coming from higher up, and we are going to end up with worse police as a result. And a video that I'm going to play to you a little bit later on, I think, will actually shock you about the reality of what some police are getting up to or not getting up to on the streets of Britain. But look, is there not now a reasonable suggestion that if you decided that you wanted to wear a rainbow flag on your arm as a police officer, they'd let you do it, but you couldn't wear a badge to represent colleagues who've died in the line of duty? Anyway, between now and 5 o'clock, there is fresh calls for the government not to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030. That is good. We'll be having a chat about that. And if you don't fancy being buried or cremated, get a load of this. How does a boil-in-a-bag funeral grab you? Yeah. Absolutely astonishing, but I'll be talking about that. Now, though, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. Nearly 4,000 people crossed the Channel in June. That's the highest monthly figure in the last 5 years. The figures come almost 6 months after Rishi Sunak vowed to stop the boats, but that's still a 10% decrease in crossings compared to this time last year. Drivers paid nearly £1 billion more for their fuel at supermarkets last year after they increased their profit margins. An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority has found that drivers paid an extra 6 pence per litre for fuel. The Chancellor supports the CMA's call for a fuel finder scheme, enabling drivers to access live station-by-station fuel prices on their phones or sat-navs. And a Cabinet Office investigation says Sue Gray did break the Civil Service Code as a result of undeclared contact between herself and the Labour Party. The former senior civil servant led the investigation into lockdown-breaking gatherings at Downing Street. Miss Gray was cleared last week by an advisory committee on business appointments to begin work as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff. The anti-corruption watchdog ruled it had seen no evidence that her decision-making was impaired while serving in Whitehall. Downing Street insists discussions on NHS pay and conditions can't be held unless strikes are called off. The British Medical Association says doctors could continue to strike over the next few years if their demands are not met. Junior doctors are planning 5 days of strike action from the 13th to the 18th of July, and consultants are walking out on the 20th and 21st. Almost 650,000 appointments and operations have been postponed in England since widespread disruption started late last year. Those are the headlines. More on all those stories, head to our website, gbnews.com.
Right then, so a group of MPs and manufacturers are calling on Rishi Sunak to rethink his 2030 ban on petrol and diesel cars, saying that the move is too early and it could cost hundreds of thousands of jobs and leave households worse off. So we've got three pretty good reasons straight off the bat there to ditch this ridiculous policy. But a poll by the Mail found that just 1 in 4 people back the 2030 timescale. That's a fourth reason. It's deeply unpopular. I'm joined now by motoring journalist Danny Kelly. Danny, thank you very much. Surely we have to delay this ridiculous ban, the time frame that we've got now on banning the sale of petrol and diesel cars. It's going to cost people a load of money. It's going to knacker some of our infrastructure as well. And for what as well? Danny, what's your view?
Well, I've got another great reason why Rishi Sunak should ditch this, because his nemesis, Boris Johnson, it was his crazy idea back in 2020, free from the shackles of the European Union, because the EU had decided that the ban on internal combustion engine brand new car sales, Patrick, was going to be 2035. For some reason, I think maybe it was his missus. I think Carrie's a real greenie and a bit of a lefty at heart, and I think she persuaded him to bring it forward to 2030. It's madness. If anything, if you're going to benefit from the shackles being released from the EU, it should be 2040, because that's when it was originally supposed to be. 2040, then 2035, in line with the rest of the European Union. And Boris Johnson, he must have been on the source the night before. He then decided to bring it forward to 2030. Let me tell you, Patrick, there is very little confidence in electric cars. For the used car market, you can't give them away. I wouldn't touch one, not with a barge pole, but with a 120-watt electric charging cable. The new car market, they'll tell you that it's very buoyant, but they're only comparing to last year's figures. And so obviously if there's an improvement, they're going to spin it in a good way. It's an awful idea. And also, Patrick, in Germany, the biggest car manufacturing company in the European Union, they are now starting to get itchy feet about this 2035, and they are now trying to introduce by the back door some cleaner internal combustion engines selling from 2035. It's a disaster. The Daily Mail have got the finger on the pulse once again.
They do. Currently, each public charging point has an average of 36 drivers fighting over it. So we are supposed to be, if you'll excuse the pun, accelerating as a human race. We are supposed to be going forward. We are now potentially going to be shackling ourselves to some technology that may or may not work, where we can't actually drive in, one continual straight line, single journey to the point that we need to go to. Can you imagine being stuck with, 3 kids in the back of your car? You're trying to drive them somewhere to visit their nan who's sick or something, and you've got to get there in time, and then you pull in at a service station and you've got to wait 12 hours to charge your car up because there's too many people fighting over it. But it's the cost as well. It is just the cost of people's jobs to appease a green lobby that will never be happy no matter what we do.
No, that's right. It's interesting what you say, because what you're discussing there is something called range anxiety. A pal of mine's got a 75 grand Tesla, Patrick. He went up to Edinburgh. He was 60 miles from Edinburgh. The range said he had 80 left in the tank. He had to turn the air conditioning off. He told the kids that he couldn't have the music on. He was panicking. So they had to go to sweltering Edinburgh with no AC. When I was down in London last week on Nana's show, I was stuck. It was 28, 29 degrees last Sunday, the week before this Sunday. And there was a fully electric Volkswagen taxi on the hottest day of the year, and he had all of his windows down. Now, the reason that he's got all his windows down is because he can't put the aircon on. Otherwise, it's too draining. Patrick, you're right. The infrastructure is not there. No. People are getting itchy feet about the whole of the idea. And this madness of the 2050 net zero, and if the ban on new petrol and diesel cars is really going to get you over the line, I don't believe it is, Patrick. I think almost, Patrick, and I've been saying this for years, I think, one of the benefits of leaving the EU is to make life more advantageous and better. Yeah. So rather than 2035, put it back to 2040.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I mean, I was fully in favour of, once we left the European Union, becoming, Singapore-on-Thames. I wanted us to just completely take full advantage of it all. I just make ourselves an absolute domestic paradise for anyone who wants to come over here. Oh, no, we can't possibly do that. It's like we're deliberately trying to make things worse for us. You mentioned the point there about infrastructure. So just 21% of people have faith that we've got enough infrastructure. If you're going to say to us that you've got to essentially ditch your old diesel or your petrol car. They're also now talking about how hybrids are an absolute shocker as well, because they release 5 times as many emissions as they thought they actually would. You have a look then about where a lot of the batteries come from. I mean, I don't particularly, I don't know how great for the environment my diesel car is at the moment, but I'm pretty confident that not huge parts of it were mined out of the ground by a one-armed Congolese orphan, which is quite a nice thing to be able to know when I turn the ignition in that. I couldn't say the same for a lot of the electric vehicles. I just do not trust that our politicians have put in place the infrastructure that is needed for us to actually drive around in these ridiculous targets that they've set for us.
That's right. That's why you sleep so well at night, because no Congolese kids were harmed in the making
of this car.
Internal combustion. And by the way, Patrick, I've got some great news for you. Just keep driving petrol and diesel cars, because if the ban does come in at 2030, your car, mate, is going to skyrocket in price. It's going to skyrocket because if people, the majority of the logical, good-thinking citizens of the UK, they're going to want to continue driving diesel and petrol cars. And if you can't buy a new one, the used car ones are going to go through the roof.
Absolutely. Look, thank you very much. Always an absolute pleasure, mate. Take care. Look after yourself. It's Danny Kelly there, motoring journalist, friend of the show, friend of the channel. Right, OK, so if you told someone in a police car that a person had been assaulted 200 yards away, you can see it, it's just over there, the assault is taking place, what would you say if they told you, not my job, mate? Think I'm making this up? I'm not. I'll show you very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
At 5 o'clock, I will hear from one of the top Tory MPs who are urging Rishi Sunak to cut net migration by 400,000 before the next election. They've put together a 12-point plan. I am asking you, do you actually think he cares? Because I'm not sure he really does. Is he just using the office of Prime Minister as another rung on his career ladder? GBviews at gbnews.com. But this is different. Let's put it this way. What we're doing now is different. To the news of what's being called a boil-in-the-bag funeral. The country's largest funeral provider is going to offer people a sustainable alternative to a traditional burial or cremation. The process involves the body being put in a biodegradable pouch, which is then placed in a container filled with pressurised water. This kind of funeral isn't totally new. The process was chosen by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who sadly died in 2021. I am joined now by Douglas Davies, who's a professor in theology and religious studies at Durham University. Thank you very much for joining me. What do you make of the boil-in-the-bag funerals?
I make a great deal of them. I don't particularly like that phrase because I think it's like it brings a degree of indignity, really, to the people who will have this method of funeral. But I think, broadly speaking, we're talking about something that's going to be, in ecological and environmental terms, advantageous to our society and therefore to our world just now. And also, of course, it's an innovation. And the British have been rather good at innovation when it comes to dealing with those of us when we die. Late 19th century, we bring in cremation. It took nearly 50 years before even 1% of the British public was cremated. But then by the mid-1960s, more than half, and now 80% of us are cremated. The other 20% buried. But for some people, and I did work on this back in the 1990s, woodland burial, ecological burial, came to appeal to people. And I think that this method will also appeal to a considerable number of people when they ponder their lifestyle and their death style, if I can put it like that.
No, absolutely. And look, I can, to be honest with you, I can see the appeal more of being buried in amongst the roots of a mighty oak in the woods, more than I can being shoved in a bag like a 1970s chicken and then boiled for a bit. What happens to the body?
Well, the body is taken, put into the resumator. You showed some photographs of the machine. The door is closed. The body is then covered with a water solution with a 5% alkaline content. It's warmed and put under pressure. And after about 4 hours or so, depending on the body itself, you pull out, you withdraw the skeleton. All the rest of us will have been dissolved away. And the skeleton is there, very friable, and that can easily be reduced into what looks very much like powder, like floury powder, rather than the cremated remains that many people are familiar with, rather grey and crusty, let's say. So you end up with cremated remains. You can do with them. You end up with resumated remains. You could do with them much as you could do before with cremated remains. But perhaps, I suppose, the key issue is the environmental factor. You're not putting the kind of gases into the air. Many of us who've got heads full of mercury fillings in our teeth, these have been really problematic for cremation for 20-odd years now. That goes. And so in that sense, an overall picture is one of environmental friendliness rather than the lack of it.
Look, I completely, by the way, you know, I know that it's a difficult topic to talk about sometimes, and I don't want it to seem like I am being too flippant about the whole thing. I mean, I must say, I've got to be honest with you, it's not for me, right? But that probably is because the environmental side of things are not necessarily at the forefront of my mind, as they are for a lot of other people. So it's horses for courses, in a sense, there. I can't help but wonder, you know, as your esteemed professor in theology and religious studies, I mean, is there anything in the Bible about whether or not this is okay?
I can't think of anything in the Bible. What is important is, historically speaking, the Christian churches have not been they've not really caught up with cremation. I've worked on this for 30-odd years. They don't have a theology of cremation. They don't really have a ritual for it, despite the fact that 80% of the Britons are in fact cremated. So I'm trying to get the Church of England and other churches indeed to think about this. I'm trying to kickstart them into thinking, what is a theology and a ritual or liturgy appropriate for this? You see, I found in my earlier researches, and I've researched reusing old graves, woodland burials, you name it, I've studied it. There are those people who are cremated who don't particularly want to be cremated. There are those, for example, who don't like the thought of having a grave that nobody will ever look after. I mean, if you're an old single person, woman or man, with no family left, who on earth's going to look after your grave? And in Britain today, there's a certain kind of cultural shame in people over not having anybody left to look after their graves. This is an interesting factor that nobody really has studied, I suppose, except myself. For those people, when woodland burial came along, they preferred that over cremation because nature took over their site. Nature looked after them. But now, with this particular innovation, there will be those who didn't like the idea of burning anyway. So this is an option.
This is you've hit a good point there, because for me, you know, I spent my entire life afraid of fire, so I don't really feel like I want to, you know, be cremated. But there we go. Look, Douglas, thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate you coming on, and I think as well, you know, adding a slightly more grown-up element to this discussion than what I was offering. It's Douglas Davies there, who's Professor in Theology and Religious Studies at Durham University. Not sure you'll catch me getting bald in a bag anytime soon. Not on my own choice anyway. But now, to Patrick's pick of the day. Yes, I pick a story that isn't dominating the news bulletins, but it caught my eye. And here's one. It's a video that shows a police community support officer in Sussex appearing to refuse to attend an alleged assault. So just check this out.
Right, you need to get around to the co-op. Honestly, there's just been a fight round there because people are trying to stop the shoplifters that you're doing nothing about. There's a member of the public just been assaulted by a 15-year-old girl who's drunk, had a drink thrown in her face, got punched. People have called the police. We come round here and you're sitting here. I know you're not, but the sight of the car will make them scatter. And you're afraid to deal with it then? It kind of is the point. That's the perception. That's just cowardice. No, it is. I'm afraid it is. This is the whole reason these problems exist. That's a pretty poor attitude, I'm afraid. Wow. That's disappointing.
It's more than disappointing. It's absolutely shameful, isn't it? I mean, what on earth is going on there? You go, oh, sorry, not my job, Gov. Excuse me, it literally is it not? Oh, I'm not a response vehicle. So you will not attend the scene of a drunk 15-year-old girl who's been accused of shoplifting and then assaulting people. What on earth will you go to? It doesn't bode well, does it? If he'd have gone, yeah, I hate to break this to you, but there's a gunman over there. I mean, what have they done? Driven off in the other direction. Sussex police have issued this following statement. Keeping the public safe and feeling safe is paramount, and our officers and PCSOs work hard to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour, often in challenging circumstances. We work closely with local retailers and partners to help prevent and respond to antisocial behaviour and assaults on shop workers. We are sorry for the clumsy language used by the PCSO in this exchange and acknowledge the public's concern. A police unit was dispatched to the scene as a matter of priority. Our response to this incident is being reviewed. Yeah. Absolutely, as it should be. Can you imagine that? Some poor person getting beaten up by a drunk 15-year-old girl and some coppers sat in a car probably having their lunch saying, nah, I don't really fancy this, I'm not a response vehicle. Oh, it's just absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, now, moving on. More than 20 MPs are now urging Rishi Sunak to get tough on immigration. They are saying their jobs depend on it, his job depends on it, he's got to slash it by 400,000. They've given him a 12-point plan. I don't think he's got the bottle to do it. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Do you think Rishi Sunak really cares about doing what's best for the country, or is this just another rung on his career ladder as 25 Tory MPs beg him to enact their 12-point plan to deal with mass immigration? It's the only chance he's got on the doorstep. Will he listen? I'm not sure he really cares. Am I wrong? In other news, has multiculturalism failed? We're looking at what's happened in France. We're looking right across Europe, Sweden, Germany, and crucially, here in the UK. Could what's happened in France, all that rioting, happen over here? And why? In other news, I'm also going to be talking a lot about this as well. Our new GB News campaign, Don't Kill Cash. Big banks want control, and as we've seen for the likes of Nigel Farage, they can try to defund fund you to non-person you by freezing your assets or telling you that you can't have your money with them if you have the wrong views. That, I think, is absolutely devastating. Don't kill cash. That's our new campaign. You can take part in it now by looking at that PR code. And yes, OK, for those of you who missed it in the 3 p.m, I did perform on stage with the Dreamboys. I fulfilled the final part of the pledge because you wonderful people have raised now nearly £95,000 for the mental health charity Mind. We will be showing a full version of my performance later on in the show. So it is tea time, I'm aware of that. Maybe start eating now so you don't get part of your dinner a little bit later on. But it's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. That's the link. If you can go on there and spare a couple of quid, why not? Let's just see if we can do the final push and get to £100,000 for the mental health charity Mind to save some lives together. Patrick Christys, GB News. OK, yes, a couple of things then. Do you think that Rishi Sunak is only in it for himself? gbviews@gbnews.com. It's whether or not he's going to have the bottle to do what the Red Wall MPs are begging him to do, which is sort out immigration and keep them in a job. Also, has multiculturalism failed? In light of what's happened in France, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, though, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. The top story this hour, nearly 4,000 migrants crossed the English Channel in June. That's the highest monthly figure for the past 5 years, pushing the total for the year so far to more than 11,000. But that's a 10% decrease in crossings compared to June last year. The figure comes almost 6 months after Rishi Sunak vowed to stop the boats as one of his cabinet's chief objectives. Drivers paid nearly £1 billion more for their fuel at supermarkets last year after they increased their profit margins. An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority has found that drivers paid an extra 6 pence a litre for fuel. The Chancellor supports the CMA's call for a cheapest fuel finder website, which could help motorists find the best and nearest fuel prices on phones or in-car sat-navs. Downing Street insists discussions on NHS pay and conditions can't be held unless strikes are called off. The British Medical Association says doctors could continue to strike over the next few years if their demands are not met. Junior doctors are planning 5 days of strike action from the 13th to the 18th of July, and consultants are walking out on the 20th and 21st of July. Rail passengers are being warned of disruption as train drivers refuse to work overtime this week. Services with 16 train operators will be running a limited service from today until Saturday, as representatives continue to dispute their pay. ASLEF says members at 15 train operators will take part in industrial action from the 17th to the 22nd of July. Now, a man has been jailed for life after strangling his wife and their 2 children, aged 6 and 4 years old, and a warning: the following images may be distressing to some viewers. Body cam footage released by police shows Sarju Chelaval urging police to shoot him at his home in Kettering. The 52-year-old has been ordered to serve a minimum term of 40 years for killing his partner, Anju Asok, and their 2 children, Jiva and Janvi, last December. Now, in France, town halls and municipal buildings have been attacked during 6 days of riots across the country. The mayor and residents of Persan in northern France came together in an anti-violence rally when their town hall was set alight by rioters. 100 more arrests were made following the death of 17-year-old pizza delivery boy Nahel Mazouk, who was shot dead by police at a traffic stop in Paris last week. The president, Emmanuel Macron, has ordered a massive police presence to remain on the streets. But France correspondent for The Times, David Chazan, says things are starting to calm down.
Not only did the arrests drop dramatically, but there was a significant fall in violence and vandalism. There was still some trouble on the streets in cities like Marseille, a little bit in Lyon, and a few scuffles and clashes in the suburbs of Paris, but far less than before. And that's the second night running that we've seen such a decrease in the intensity of the violence. So the hope is now that these protests are beginning to die down.
His Majesty the King has begun his first Holyrood week since his coronation. King Charles was welcomed by crowds at Kinneil House, Bolnesfell Kirk, the historic home of the Dukes of Hamilton. Among those he greeted was Bolness Fair Queen, who was wearing her ceremonial robes and crown. The annual tradition, also known as Royal Week, sees the monarch immersing themselves in Scottish culture and heritage. And later, King Charles will take part in a ceremony where he'll be presented with keys to the city. Now, as the war in Ukraine continues and the UK faces new threats with AI technology advancing, GB News presenter Nigel Farage has been sitting down with Sir Michael Graydon, a former Chief of the Air Staff, to speak about defence spending.
Are we spending too little money on defence?
Yes. And I think a lot of people have begun to recognise it. I mean, a number of politicians have said we should be spending 3%. Given the circumstances, it's hard to say. How can you possibly, when you've carried out reviews, when things around, you've discussed Georgia, you've discussed Crimea, and all the rest of it, how is it that you can continue to address that problem, which is a problem, let's face it, to our security, to our freedom?
Well, you can watch the full interview with Sir Michael Graydon at 7 o'clock tonight on Farage. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Lots to get through. Let's get cracking. Talking of cracks, you'll be seeing mine later when I show you the Dreamboys footage, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, Rishi Sunak is facing calls from more than 20 of his own MPs to cut net migration by 400,000 before the next election. Net migration last year was 606,000. And the MPs, who are from a group called the New Conservatives, say the proposed measures would help the government meet the 2019 manifesto pledge. There will be fewer lower-skilled migrants and overall numbers will come down. This is staggering for a few reasons, OK? That such a large group of Conservative MPs feel as though they essentially need to draw up their own policy and then go so public with it. There was a key line in this for me, which was quoted in the media earlier on, which is that several of these MPs are concerned that they're getting, quotes, hammered on the doorstep over migration. My big concern would be whether or not Rishi Sunak actually really wants to enact this policy. Does he care about not just Red Wall MPs, but mostly Red Wall MPs, who will quite possibly lose their jobs as a result of the migration issue? I'm joined now, I'm very pleased to say I am, by Tom Hunt, who's the author of the New Conservatives report. Tom, thank you very much for your time today. First and foremost, it's worthwhile reminding people what this report actually says. So what's in it?
I mean, ultimately, it's about going to that pledge we made in the 2019 manifestos. We said that we would decrease migration. And sadly, what we've really seen since that has been quite a dramatic increase. Admittedly, some of that was because of the refugees from Hong Kong and Ukraine, but even taking that into account, the numbers are far too high. So essentially, this plan, with its 12 recommendations, is a route map to us meeting that promise we made to the electorate in 2019. And getting it so net migration is decreasing based upon the 2019 numbers as a first base, as stage one in properly taking control of our immigration system and actually getting much closer to where most of the British public are at when it comes to the kind of migration they'd like to see.
OK, all right. And some of the key elements to this, which I think are really quite sound, actually. Stopping the student backdoor into Britain. I mean, good grief, that should just be common sense. Making sure that only 5% of our social housing stock can go to non-Brits. Because at the moment, we are seeing British people getting bumped down housing waiting lists because somebody has just come over here from a different country and, frankly, can't look after themselves. You also want to raise the amount of money, don't you, that someone would have to be able to earn before they can be given right to remain, I think, to £38,000. Is that right? But this is all stuff that should have been happening anyway, isn't it?
Well, I think to be fair, the Prime Minister inherited this points-based system. I think since he did, he has made some positive moves on student dependence. A few months ago, him and the Home Secretary said that if you're on a one-year taught master's programme, you're no longer allowed to bring any dependents. I mean, that counted for about 100,000 of the number. That's about 600 figure you quoted. So that's a step in the right direction. There's lots of good things. He's committed to decreasing it. But, we think, we've just got, we've ended EU free movement. We've got control of our migration system. I think the fact there's a bit of a healthy debate going on about it isn't a bad thing. The report that we've put together is designed to be constructive. There's 12 recommendations in there, many of which I believe hopefully can be adopted. And it can get us. It's important, the point about social housing. I think people are beginning to realise. People are beginning to realise that the mass migration we've seen over the last few decades is having a real impact on their quality of life when it comes to getting affordable housing, when it comes to seeing a GP. All sorts of different areas. And these are people who do see the benefits of managed migration. They are not xenophobes. They're people who see the benefits of managed migration, but the scale of it we've seen is too much. That coupled with illegal migration, people do feel strongly about it. I feel strongly about it. And as members of Parliament, we're plugged into our constituents, and that was why we were there today.
You know what I think the best bit about your proposals is this desire to have a report that runs concurrently on. So we get the jobs benefits of immigration. That's just published all the time. That's the whole thing that props the whole thing up and makes people, think that this is all a great idea, mass migration on the scale that we've got at the minute. But what you really want is another report that's running alongside it pretty much, which shows the impact on public services. So that people, ordinary Brits out there, can weigh up the kind of cost-benefit analysis. Isn't it really? That is absolutely vital. And that is why I think people feel as though they've been conned thus far. Why have you had to fight to get a report that published that goes, well, look, we can have migration at this level, but here's the impact it will have on your local GP surgery or schools or housing? It's almost like they've been trying to hide that from us.
Well, I think there's been a focus on net migration. There's always focused on GDP figures, not GDP per capita, not pressure on public services, not the consequences of rapid social and cultural change. It's important when we debate this issue, we look at the issue in the round. I mean, ultimately, we want migration that is going to be beneficial to the quality of lives of British residents. We want people to be able to live in a community where it's easy for them to see their GP, easy for a kid to get a place at school, easy to get affordable housing, and actually to be able to go into your city centre and town centre and actually feel like you're living in a cohesive community, where people are there with shared values, where people are integrated. All of these things matter. We can continue to get the benefits of migration, but we can get higher skilled migration. We've discriminated a little bit when it comes to the student numbers as well. We've said that if you're a higher quality institution and it's a higher quality course, then of course we want to continue to see some of those benefits. I mean, if you're working at sort of the Cambridge Science Park affiliated with the University of Cambridge, you're carrying out research which is of global and national benefit, that continues. But if you're going to a lower quality university doing a course of very limited value, and also, why when you complete the course, can you hang around for 2 to 3 years afterwards, even if you don't have a job to go to? I mean, hypothetically, if I was offered the chance to go to, a college in America to do a good degree, my assumption would be I'd go there by myself, I'd stay there for as long as the degree lasts, and then I'd come back afterwards. So, look, we've got to resolve all of those things, but I think it is fair to acknowledge with Rishi Sunak, he's been incredibly brave on the illegal migration bill. He's gone further than anybody else has. I think he is a lot sounder on immigration than a lot of people give him credit for, and I'm confident we can really get somewhere, with him, and we can make significant progress on this issue.
How urgent is this? That phrase, we're getting hammered on the doorstep, and, to be fair, Tom, the fact that you and 20-odd other people have gone so public about this and put together what, may I just say, is an incredibly well thought out and very, very kind of common sense filled report here that some would say is almost, I hate to use this phrase, but oven ready, as it were, for Rishi Sunak to go and use. I mean, clearly you feel that there is a matter of significant urgency here, and a lot of Tory MPs are going to lose their jobs if Rishi Sunak doesn't put this into place. So does he get that?
Look, I feel millions of people, millions of British people up and down the country for a very long period of time feel like they've been shut out of a debate on immigration, like they're not part of the debate, like nobody ever voted to have net migration at these levels. They've been shut out of that debate. Right now, there is an unhealthy, undemocratic chasm between where a majority of the public are when it comes to this issue and the actual reality of the numbers and what's happening. We've got to narrow that. better for democracy if you do that, and it's better for the country if you do that. So yeah, it is. When we see tens of thousands of people coming across here every year illegally, when we see net migration at a level which would you struggle to get 5% of the population supporting net migration being at the level it's currently at, yes, it is urgent. It's urgent for the country. And it's, but I think it's important we realise that the only way we're going to get significant movement on this is through the Conservative government. And Rishi Sunak has made positive moves. As I say, he's been robust on illegal migration. He's done the things on the student dependence. He said he wants to see the numbers come down. We've got to have faith in him. But this report today is designed to be constructive. And actually, if as members of Parliament we don't listen to our constituents and we don't raise their concerns in the way that we have done today, what's our job? It
would be nice, but just to say, look, Tom, you're incredibly sound, right? And I've had a few MPs on from this new Conservative group who are very sound. But you are just saying things that I think most people would expect normal Conservatives to think and believe. And, crucially, you made the vital point there that this is the majority view. What you're putting across here right now, I am convinced, is the majority view from people. Is there not a problem that there aren't enough proper Conservative MPs?
Look, I mean, I spend a lot of my time knocking on doors and talking to my constituents, and a lot of what I say and a lot of my activity is driven and motivated by those conversations I have. And I also would say that a lot of the people who've raised concerns about migration in recent years have been people who themselves came here a number of years ago, and they've integrated and made a positive contribution. And actually, they can see many people who have moved recently who haven't really made much attempt to integrate, and they don't like it. So I think all sorts of different people have been raising this concern. But yeah, it frustrates me. You get sections of the media who sort of brand us as being, the right wing of the Conservative Party or veering to the right. This is the centre ground. You look at all polling. I think there's only about one constituency in the country where a majority of people in that constituency don't think that migration's been too high. The vast majority think it's been too high. That doesn't mean that they don't see the benefits of migration. That doesn't mean that they're xenophobic. It just means that we want it at sustainable levels, which is good for the quality of life of the British people. And that's where we've got to get to. We will not get it with the Labour Party. We'll get, all we'll get from the Labour Party is their approach to the HGV crisis, which is to get more and more workers, from abroad for that. They voted against all of the immigration measures we've brought in. The last Labour Prime Minister we have branded people as bigots who had concerns about, uncontrolled migration from Europe. So, we know the Labour Party would only make it worse, but it falls to us, the Conservatives. There's no good just pointing at Labour. We've got to deliver.
Yeah, Tom, look, thank you, and thank you for your time. I must say that report made absolutely fascinating reading. I'll continue to pick through it, but it is Tom Hunt there, who's the author of this new Conservatives report. I would urge people to go away and read that as well. You will be able to go and check it out more on this story on our website. It's gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news website on the country. It's got all the best analysis, big opinion, all the latest breaking news, as of course you all know by now. But get a load of this. This feeds into it a little bit, actually. It kind of moves it on. People have been rioting in France now for 6 days. But I'm asking this. Is multiculturalism working? Or actually, has it failed? And is Britain maybe on the brink of something like what we've been seeing just across the channel there in France? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, in just a few minutes' time, I will have news of a major new GB News campaign as we urge the government, don't kill cash. And it's very important, this. OK, I'm sure lots of you will have already seen what Nigel Farage is going through, where a bank is essentially cancelling him, as he understands it, just for his political views because he's anti-establishment as well. More and more people have come out of the woodwork. So there is this idea now that if you have the wrong think or the wrong views, you can essentially have your assets frozen or taken off you. Fine, OK. I mean, that's a little bit rum, isn't it? And the people who are laughing at the fact that Nigel Farage is going through this at the moment should be very, very wary of what they're laughing at, because it could happen to them. I think that it is a way of control as well, and we're going to be able to talk about that a little bit later on. But also, in terms of us moving towards a cashless society, it affects the most vulnerable people, the elderly, the homeless, people in rural communities as well, if they've got a bad internet connection, etc. It is vital that we don't kill cash, and we are launching a campaign to try to get the government to commit to having cash as legal tender in this country for the foreseeable future. There's a QR code on your screen there now. If you hold your phone in front of that, you can just go on the website as well if you find that a bit easier. You can sign a petition and we can try and make our voices heard. But also a little later this hour, yes, what you've all been waiting for, the full story of the night that I got my clothes off in front of a few thousand people, sorry, 1,000 people, not a few thousand people, it wasn't Wembley. And it was all for charity, OK? And how you can donate to that as well. JustGiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. However, matters arguably more serious. France has been on fire for almost a week. Hard to tell, though, the way that Paris carries on. But thousands of people have been arrested and at least £100 million worth of damage has been caused as violence has torn across the country. It came after a 17-year-old boy of Algerian descent was shot dead by a police officer last week. It is worthwhile noting as well that I did have a guest on last week who said to me anyway that he understood that the ethnicity of the police officer who did the shooting was not indeed white, so I think that might be a point of relevance, but there we go. It got me thinking about similar problems in many European countries and led me to ask the question whether or not multiculturalism has failed. I'm joined now by counter-terrorism and societal experts. It's Wazik. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. A lot of people were talking to me over the weekend about this. What's going on in France? Could something like that really happen here? Is this a visible sign of multiculturalism failing?
Well, I think it certainly has the hallmarks of something like multiculturalism failing. The fact that a 17-year-old of Algerian descent was killed, presumably by someone who's also not ethnically French, certainly gives the impression that actually what's taken place as a result of that seems to suggest that those who are rioting are not actually happy with everything that's being given to them in France. So the freedom to believe and to practice their religion in a way that perhaps other religions aren't able to practice in Muslim-majority countries. So yes, there is certainly an argument to be made that multiculturalism is failing.
Now, what we are looking at there in France is clearly not a particularly well-integrated society. And France has a huge Muslim diaspora, a huge Muslim population, as well as African, etc., etc., etc. And if it takes the... And by the way, you know, clearly, I think, unlawful, it would appear, killing of a 17-year-old boy. I'm not trying to diminish that. But if it takes that... If the reaction to that is to cause £100 million worth of damage and set everything on fire and try to kill the mayor of a particular city in all of this, that to me indicates that there is a lot of seething, bubbling resentment and lawlessness just below the surface. That does not scream integration to me.
No, it doesn't. And I don't think it's just a case that there's things that are bubbling underneath the surface. We have to really put things into perspective. Some of these people who are rioting are not rioting for a just cause. What they not that there is any justification to riot, but they're looting retail stores. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to help this 17-year-old who has been killed, what seemingly appears to be an unlawful killing. So I don't buy the idea that some of these or most of these rioters are actually acting in a just way.
No, not at all. I mean, how many pairs of new trainers do you have to steal before you feel as though you've got justice for the 17-year-old lad who was shot? I mean, the two things are completely separate, aren't they, as far as I'm concerned? I've got to ask you the question, though. Do you think that something like what we're seeing in France could happen here?
I'd be wary. I'd be very cautious to say anything in that sense. I think Britain is one of the best countries for ethnic minorities, for immigrants. We have a really good track record in terms of our educational outcomes of those who are of immigrant communities. We have to see how we've contributed towards society. And even when we do have instances where, communities or minority communities have actually, broken the law, it's been nipped in the bud very quickly, and that's something that we can be proud of in comparison to some of our European counterparts.
Well, exactly, and you mention our European counterparts there. Is there anywhere in Europe that you think that has really got multiculturalism right? Because I'm looking at quite prolific examples in places like Germany. I'm looking at places like Sweden. We're looking at France. I mean, has it actually really worked anywhere?
I'm not sure that we can give a binary answer to that, yes or no. I think there are some instances where, there have been successes, and there's also been instances where there's been failures. And in the case of this, it has been a failure with the French riots. But then we have to put this into a broader context. We've seen rioting taking place over a number of years with a lot of union workers who haven't been getting the pay that they deserve. So there is a really interesting point to be made in terms of multiculturalism. But I think when we look at Britain, we are really the model to be looked up to.
Yeah, just full disclosure as well. I am covering for Nigel Farage later, and we're doing quite a lot on this. And I've got a couple of guests on it as well, and I went out and about earlier on. I went to the Edgware Road in London, which is conveniently just around the corner, but also quite a good example, really, of an area with, you know, a high influx of people from predominantly around the Middle East and countries like that, and just wanted to get their views, really, on whether or not they felt well integrated, whether or not they felt multiculturalism was a good thing for Britain. A fascinating insight, actually, a good range of views in it. So I'll be showing that a little bit later on. One of the concerns that some people raised for me was how do I phrase this? Maybe the importation of some kind of foreign drama. So let's just say that there is an issue that kicks off between, you know, I'm just making this up, but, you know, the Egyptian government and the Lebanese government, right? And then that plays out on the streets of Britain between two communities who happen to live and operate near each other here. And I'm not convinced that the vast majority of Brits would want that. I mean, is there not a risk of that? We're not seeing that in some situations in places like Leicester, examples of it like that.
I think, yes, of course, you know, any immigrant community is not going to completely sever their ties to their country of origin. You know, it would be ridiculous to assume that. And where there are importation of politics from abroad and it being played out on British soil needs to be obviously tackled. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen. It can happen. We saw that happen in Leicester, where, you know, whatever's happening in countries across the Indian subcontinent is now being played out here, and minority communities are being, targeted because of what's happening in foreign lands. And, you know, there's always going to be that case. But the fact is, when people do come to this country, they do integrate. We do have our British values of, you know, the rule of law, freedom of speech, freedom of belief, democracy, and these still function, and they are continuing to function. And that's one of the hallmarks to show that actually we are doing a lot better than some of these other countries.
Yeah, and that is what a lot of people said to me as well. They said they lived in other European countries, and this was by far and away the best. Wazeek, thank you very much. Wazeek there, who is a counter-terrorism expert and also a social commentator as well. Look, I will have a lot for you, by the way, between 7 and 8 o'clock this evening. A fantastic team out there have been doing a lot of work on the multiculturalism side of things. We've unearthed some eye-opening and jaw-dropping content, actually. Videos from politicians from the United Arab Emirates talking about what is going to happen to Europe with the levels of mass migration that we've got, talking about the issues that are going to be playing out on the streets of Britain as well. So, you're really going to want to stay tuned for that a little bit later on. But in the show I'm doing now, there's the frightening story of the banks who are shutting accounts of people because they don't agree with their political views. And stand by for the full story of my triumphant appearance with the male strippers, the Dreamboys. Yes, I know a lot of you have been donating for that. Thank you very much. I upheld my end of the bargain and did it all for charity. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. Nearly 4,000 migrants crossed the Channel in June. That's the highest monthly figure in the last 5 years. The figures come almost 6 months after Rishi Sunak vowed to stop the boats. Also in the news, drivers paid nearly £1 billion more for fuel at supermarkets last year after they increased their profit margins. An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority has found drivers paid an extra 6 pence per litre for fuel at supermarkets. The Chancellor supports a call for a fuel finder scheme enabling drivers to access station-by-station fuel prices on their phones or sat-navs. And a Cabinet Office investigation says Sue Gray broke the Civil Service Code as a result of undeclared contact between herself and the Labour Party. The former senior civil servant led the investigation into lockdown-breaking gatherings in Downing Street. But Miss Gray was cleared last week by the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments to start work as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff in September. And Downing Street insists discussions on NHS pay and conditions can't be held unless strikes are called off. The British Medical Association says doctors could continue to strike over the next few years if their demands are not met. Junior doctors are planning 5 days of strike action from the 13th to the 18th of July, and consultants are walking out on the 20th and 21st of July. Almost 650,000 appointments have had to be rescheduled since disruption started. Those are your latest news headlines. More on all the stories by moving to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And the numbers looking like this for you. The pound will buy you $1.2694 and €1.1629. The price of gold, £1,517.49 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,527 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Today, we are launching a new campaign right here on GB News. Don't kill cash. Britain is fast becoming a cashless society. More and more retailers are choosing to only accept card payments, and vulnerable people who rely on cash are increasingly being left behind. A massive 5.4 million adults still rely on cash, and it's used in 6 billion transactions every single year. But strong vested interests are pushing for it to be permanently replaced by debit and credit cards and other electronic payments. We are calling on the government to introduce legislation committing to protect the status of cash as legal tender and as a widely accepted means of payment in the UK until at least 2050. In fact, we've launched a petition to prevent a cashless society. It's on our website right now, gbnews.com/cash. Or, if you've got a smartphone, then simply use it to click on the QR code on your screens right now, and you can go to our petition. Help GB News with our campaign and tell the authorities, don't kill cash. Our campaign, of course, ties in with this story. There's loads of different aspects to this. Banks are closing people's accounts because they don't agree with their views. And this was all flying under the radar, largely, until Nigel Farage piped up, and all of a sudden loads of people started to come out of the woodwork, don't they? This story was broken by our very own Nigel Farage last Thursday, and since then it has absolutely exploded. Numerous people said that they've effectively been cancelled, financially excluded. This is the thing. If you say the wrong thing, you think the wrong thing, you believe the wrong thing, or you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, then you can have your bank account closed. And this, by the way, includes a vicar who says that he was victim after complaining about a bank's comments on Pride. So you could even argue that that's religious discrimination, wouldn't you? I would love to see them do that to somebody of other communities, wouldn't you? Not sure that's going to happen. It's now been reported that Jeremy Hunt is deeply concerned about this and has ordered an investigation. Right, OK, well, that investigation needs to take place too sweet. Joining me now is Reform UK spokesperson and former Brexit Party MEP. It's the wonderful Alex Phillips. Alex, thank you very, very much. This is an absolute shocker. Let's deal with the first thing first, which is that banks can cancel you for wrong think. That's just completely Orwellian, isn't it? And for most people, Alex, who haven't got a huge nest egg to sit back on, if we remove cash from their lives as well, they will be bankrupt and they'll have lost their house before the bank rectifies it and they get an apology.
Yeah, well, there are two things going on here. There are banks which say that if you behave violently or badly towards their staff or verbally abuse someone, or if you're, potentially involved with criminal activity, or, and this is a word that they've used, discriminate against somebody, then they have the right to close your account. And it is potentially under that last catch-all phrase of discrimination that normal people who just happen to take a view are being punished. But there's something else going on as well, which is a load of legislation that was first brought into the UK in around 2007, and it was all to do with foreign agents largely using clearinghouses of London and banks in the UK to launder money in slush funds. And then it's sort of been added to in 2017 regarding what you call politically exposed people. Now, this is supposed to account for people who hold political positions in foreign countries where there is a high level of risk of corruption. And as I alluded to earlier, things like money laundering and getting dodgy, dirty money and trying to hide it. This shouldn't, under any circumstances, be affecting somebody who is an elected official or politically connected in this country. And it's this that I think the banks are using to begin to essentially launch an establishment attack against people whose politics they fundamentally fundamentally disagree with. But I think legally there should be no right in doing this. What then happens is this precipitates a big problem where someone's been flagged as a politically exposed person, that the banks will then turn around and say, we've got to do so much background research into you, so many credit checks and crime reference checks, and, you know, swoops into your entire family and all your relatives, that actually it's going to cost us too much money to give you a bank account. So there's two things the government needs to look at here. One is this idea that anybody can have their bank account closed if they've posted something online or made a comment about whatever it is they may believe in that goes against the sort of current social mores. And the other is whether people are being sort of persecuted and having their rights to access to finances taken away because they're involved in politics.
There is also then another angle to this as well, which is just, I would argue, well, I was going to say the more human side of it, I suppose, or everything we've just spoken about there affects humans. But, you know, elderly people who are not used to using apps on their phone if they want to park their car. We don't want to live in a cashless society there, do we? The homeless as well rely on people giving them a few coins. If they're lucky, maybe a £5 note. If we live in a cashless society, that won't happen. People in rural communities who might not have a good internet connection, etc. You know, all of this stuff. So looking at the cashless society from that angle of it as well, I really do think it's important that we don't just go fully digital, isn't it?
Right, totally. I mean, when you look at what's happened over the past 10, 20, even 30 years, is banks and the big banks now wield so much power. We saw it actually, didn't we, when Liz Truss came up with an economic programme that she thought would stimulate growth in this country. And essentially, the markets turned around and said, we don't like the sound of that when it comes to buying up government gilts and government bonds and so on and so forth. And so the markets essentially got rid of a Prime Minister in the UK. But when you look at how badly the banks have behaved back in, you know, around 2008, and everyone remembers what happened, of course, to Northern Rock and the run on the banks and the huge credit crisis we had then, because banks were essentially behaving recklessly and totally irresponsibly. It was us, the consumers, who had to pick up the pieces. So essentially going to a cashless society is only going to embolden the banks more to run the world when they're not democratically elected. As you said, it will leave vulnerable people who potentially live more in the fringes when it comes to digital engagement at the whim and mercy of banks. But it also potentially has the power to lead to something kind of dystopian and similar to the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system, where if you don't act in a certain way or behave in a certain way in line with some sort of policy, be it governmental or the policy of the board of the bank, you can essentially have access to money cut off.
Exactly.
That is wrong.
It is. Alex, look, thank you very, very much. Always great to catch up with you, always great to chat. The wonderful Alex Phillips there, former UK spokesperson and former Brexit Party MEP. Yeah, very concerning. That campaign, Don't Kill Cash, go on our website. Oh, there'll be a QR code that pops up at some point as well. You can check that out on your phone. Now, it's almost time for the moment that you've all been waiting for. Yes, you're about to find out exactly what happened when I got my kits off for charity last week. Thank you to everyone who's been donating. This is the culmination of a quite a long period of time worth of work, actually, and we have managed to raise a staggering amount of money for charity, for the mental health charity Mind, to help save lives. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel. Stay tuned.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, everybody, now it's that moment that many of you have all been waiting for. I agreed to dance on stage with a group of male strippers called the Dreamboys, and last week it finally happened. I can tell you, oh, it's incredible. Anyway, if you're listening on radio, then you can watch the video on our social media channels right now. It was, of course, all because you wonderful people donated so much money for the mental health charity Mind. Here's the clip. It's Dreamboy time. I am here at the Churchill Theatre in Bromley, where in a matter of moments I will be getting my kit off on stage with the Dreamboys in front of 1,000 people. Why? Because you wonderful people have raised tens of thousands of pounds for the mental health charity Mind. You have saved some lives. Now it's time for me to do my bit. To the stage. Let's go, mate.
Your dressing room key, sir?
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello, are you Patrick?
I am indeed.
Perfect. Please sign in here.
OK. Right then, which way is the dressing room?
You want to jump in the lift? Doors closed.
Here we go. We are backstage at the Dreamboys. Outside there are so many people. I don't know if you can hear them shouting already. I am absolutely bricking it. I'm on in the second half, so I've got to watch this lot do their thing. And that gives me about an hour to think about it all. To cry. You know what? I don't know what preconceived ideas anyone has about Dreamboys or anything. This lot are top professionals. Everything they do, they train so hard. This is a highly skilled job. The amount they have to remember, the condition they've got to keep themselves in, the nerves about performing in front of these people. But you know what the best thing is? They're such nice guys. This has been an honour and a privilege. privilege, so thank you. I've just got to go out there now and smash it and do it all for charity.
Right, so as I was explaining earlier, we have an actual special guest and a special performance tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christys from GBNews, news anchor, right, a couple years ago, said, do you know what? For charity, I'm gonna shred loads of weight, get fit and Dreamboys sexy, and I'm gonna perform live on stage in front of a live audience. Ladies and gentlemen, to this day, he's raised, how much have you raised? £81,000. £81,000 for the charity Mind. Ladies and gentlemen, let's lose our minds for him and give him an amazing round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patrick Christys. Come on! Hey, thank you so much. Before you go, did you have fun?
It's been the best night of my life, yeah.
Like, bearing in mind what he does for a living, he ran off stage and was like, can I be a dream boy? Can I be a dream boy? Can he be a dream boy?
There you go.
There you go. Give him a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Well, there we go. Look, thank you, everybody who has donated. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. And I am looking at the latest donations right now in front of me on my screen, and we are at £92,779. Just a reminder as to why this is so important, OK? Male suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40, and so many people get in touch and tell me when they're donating this is for somebody very, very close to them. There is a real, genuine epidemic out there, and why Mind is so important is that, unfortunately, given extreme pressures on the NHS, which does do a lot of good work and does save lives, of course, when you are in an urgent time of mental crisis, you haven't got days, weeks or months before, unfortunately, people might take drastic and irreversible action. Mind can help bridge that gap and try to get you something urgently before, sadly, you might go on to make that decision. And I just want to say, on a personal note, we're going to be drawing a line under all of this tomorrow, and we'll be closing our donations tomorrow. So you've got about 24 hours to donate. But I'm going to be talking tomorrow a little bit about some of my own personal struggles, which I think is important. I've been asking everybody to donate and give their hard-earned cash in the middle of a cost of living crisis. I think it's important that maybe I open up a little bit as well. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. But I just want to say a massive, massive thank you, and a massive thank you to the Dreamboys as well for being so accommodating. We're on £92,779 right now. It would be absolutely incredible, wouldn't it, if we could get to 100 grand before close of play tomorrow. But thank you very, very much. JustGiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. And make sure if you're listening on radio, go right now to our YouTube, our Facebook and Twitter pages, and you'll be able to see it there. Right, OK, but I just want to finish the show with something a little bit different. We've got some breaking news. Well, GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign has already reached 10,000 signatures. There you go. You can find it at gbnews.com/cash. And well done, everybody. Look, this is obviously a campaign that we're doing right now to make sure that we don't turn into a cashless society. When we go cashless, it puts all the power in the hands of big corporations. It takes all the power away from the little guy. It takes all the power away from vulnerable people. We want the government to commit to cash being legal tender in this country and widely accepted until 2050 to protect against tyranny and also to stand up for the little people and the elderly and the homeless and all of those people who rely on cash. gbnews.com/cash, or use that QR code that you've just seen on your screen right there. Jubes and Co next. Michelle Dewberry, I'll see you tomorrow.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on